Hi, good morning. My name is Reinaldo Aguiar. Today is June the 9th, 2025, and it's about 9:45 a.m. Central Time, US Central Time. So this video is part of it is one of the videos of the series I titled Rapid Fire Tips for Law Enforcement. But this particular one, I don't think it's going to be that rapid. There's a lot of material that I would like to offer in case any law enforcement agencies are watching, right? Or if they see this video in the future, they have something to anchor to. And the main topic of today is going to be a gated community in Katy, Texas, that is called Lake Pointe Estates. And it's located in Katy, Texas, 77494. This is a gated community. It's really a subdivision, which means that legally speaking, it operates more or less independently. It's an unincorporated subdivision, meaning that it has certain dependency from the county and other administrative bodies. It has something around, I think, 89, 90 houses inside. I would say it's an upscale type of neighborhood in this area. There are houses in that small gated community that are worth $3.5, $4 million, which is, Katy is a very suburban area. And I think the median house price in the zip code 77494 is something like $350,000. There are houses in there that are worth 10 times what an average house in Katy is usually worth. Of course, not all the houses are of that price. I have one house in that gated community, but my house is not worth, of course, $4 million. And my house, I think, is the cheapest one. It's the most affordable house in the subdivision. And for transparency, I paid for it something like $990,000 or something like that. It didn't get to $1 million. The reason I'm making this video, I think it's important, right, to state what's your goal with this. I think this, looking at everything that I've learned through the last few years working on I would call it open source counterintelligence, right? Because that's really what I've been doing. I've come to learn a lot of things in different dimensions. And looking back at all those things, I realized that this gated community is important. This particular gated community, not because my house is in there. I think that was just I don't. It's not a coincidence. It was a mistake they made, right? They brought me indirectly, without wanting, to that gated community. They draw my attention to that area. That's why I bought the house there. But besides that, when I say that this is an important community or an important item in this whole geopolitical conflict, this gated community, I think, is a fundamental piece of the entire conflict. And not because I have a house in there. That's the less important thing. I think the fact that I managed to buy a house in that gated community allowed me to see and understand a lot of things that I wouldn't have seen or understood otherwise. But that's not the reason why the community is important. The community is important because it's the juncture point between different actors that appear disconnected, but they're not really disconnected, they're working together. If I look at the data that I have, the common thread among all these international actors could come down to that gated community. If that's the case, drawing the attention of federal authorities to this gated community, if I succeed at that, right? If I can get the attention of a real investigative agency, and they look at that gated community, I think it could have deep consequences, like very impactful consequences in how things are going to play out in the future in many different dimensions. And I'm sorry if I sound a little bit cryptic. It's just that it's a fine balance, right? Like I have to keep a fine balance between what I say, because I really want to get the information out and to raise awareness, not only in law enforcement circles, but also among citizens, right? But at the same time, I have to be careful not to give away information to the organization that could potentially hurt me, right? Or they could weaponize somehow. I'm going to start by sharing my screen. If you go to Spile Health and click on evidence, there is a counterintelligence journal, which is a collection of entries that I've written over the last 2 years, I think. And they touch on different topics, right? Technical observations, measurements, media, photographs, videos, and hypotheses, conclusions, right? But they touch on different subjects that sometimes are hyper-local, sometimes are global observations, right? Observations of global scope. So because of that, it might be hard to narrow it down to a single area. So what I did, I took a collection of those posts that talk specifically about topics that are related to Lake Pointe Estates and put them together in a single document. And I'm creating this video, and when I post this video online, I'm going to put a link to that document. So if any agency comes across this video, they could just reference or click on that link, and then they will be able to see the most important, what I think, right? From my vantage point, what I think could be the most important posts from that counterintelligence journal that are related specifically to Lake Pointe Estates. And then I also created an audio summary to summarize what I think are the main points, right? But again, like, this is my perspective. I imagine an investigative agency with the resources they have and the multidisciplinary teams they have, they may have a different perspective and they may see things that I missed, or they may look at things that I think are important and they may say, this is not really important. So it's just really my view into that little world, okay? And I'm offering it in case it helps. That's the basic idea. So I'm gonna start by sharing my screen. I have a window open here. Right. So this page is not formatted, it's just plain text and links and videos and images. And the idea is to make it readable, right? And so before I begin going through this, I would like to kind of go over the game plan that I have for this video. Usually when I make these videos, I try to center my attention more on events that are not really about me, right? That have nothing to do with me. And I do this for different reasons. First of all, I don't see myself as a center player in all this. I'm just an observer, right? And I happen to be a good observation point because of the amount of surveillance they have put on me. But that doesn't make me a player in all this, right? I'm just an observant and I'm just reporting what I observe. And the second reason is that when this inevitably goes to trial, they will try to weaponize anything they can. And one of the things that they could do, they could say the thing is that he has an X to crack, like he has a chip on his shoulder. And that's not the case at all. So I want to make sure that doesn't even, it's not even a possibility that they say that, right? But in this particular video, I need to talk about some things that are personal to me, and not because they're important to me, really, but because I think the timing of those events and the way they happen, right? Certain key things that one can observe in those events that are actually demonstrable. People could come in and audit those events and see that those things really happen, that the way I'm describing them, right? Because of that, I think that those observations, I believe, show coordination between these separate groups, right? That appear as separate entities, and you may think that have nothing to do with each other. If you encounter them on the streets, you would think that these people don't know each other, right? But they really know each other very well, and they work together towards a common goal or a set of common goals. Talking about these incidents, I think is important because it shows coordination and shows the timing of these events, shows that this is a campaign, that this is a deliberate effort, right? Orchestrated by an organization using common, already observed patterns and engaging multiple individuals that seem disconnected, but are not really disconnected, are all part of this organization. So that's the goal of me talking about these personal things, because it's not easy to talk about personal things knowing that this might be visible to other people, and it's not an easy thing to do. But I feel like I need to do it. With that in mind, the game plan is I'm going to talk about these hyper-local incidents, right, that affected me or that targeted me. Then I'm going to expand the loop a little bit. I'm going to talk about the community itself and how it is structured. I'm going to share some information and some observations. Okay? And then I'm going to expand the arc a little bit more and go from there to the global connections of this community. Like, how is this community connected to global entities, to international entities? And the reason why I think that could be a good way to present this arc is because if I only give you the claims, right, like of the targeted incidents, you may think, but why would somebody go through all this length to target you? But then if I show you the targeting incidents, I also show you the international connections that are tied to this community and the interests that are behind that, I think it will make sense, right? It will make sense to the viewers. They may say it could be, right? With that, I'm going to start with this, right? So the first part of this document is a series of what I consider legal harassment techniques or tactics, right? And the one on the top is not really harassment, but it's more about obstructing justice and destroying evidence, right? And this was, I'm not going to go into much detail here because it's documented in this video that is on the top, this deception that they did. But basically they marked my mailbox as undeliverable, right? As no mail can come in. And they did that basically to block any communications from the district court in which I filed a class action complaint against Elon Musk, Travis Kalanick, and a few other individuals. And so I don't receive any communications from the court, and therefore I cannot respond and cannot participate. So they're basically blocking the federal court from functioning, right? By marking the mailbox of the plaintiff as undeliverable, right? That's the technique. And the second thing that they accomplished with this is that when they put that do not deliver notice in the mailbox, they took all my mail. And in that mail, which was my property, I believe there were letters and harassment letters and legal action letters and things like that, that they had previously sent me to harass me. But now that they see legal risk, they don't want me to have them because there will be evidence against them, right, in a court of law. So what they did is that they put that notice in the mailbox and then they removed all the contents of the mailbox, which I believe is a crime at this point. Stealing mail, basically. But this is all documented in this video. So Roberts, Markel, Wilmer, Butler, Haley, PC. So they sent me this harassment letter. I call it out. They sent me a letter, right, saying basically you're going to be sued, okay? The person that signs the letter is a gentleman by the name Alex Obundar. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the last name correctly, and they're basically sending it to my company, which is the company that operates spyhell.org, okay? And it also owns that property. I purchased that house using the company, on the name of the company, right? Just to not put my name in the registration. It's basically saying that I'm going to be sued, and that they already got instructions from the Homeowners Association to sue me. Like it says specifically that we have received instructions, right? But this is the paragraph that I think is most telling, the last paragraph, and I want to read it to you. It says, this matter requires your immediate personal attention. You will be sued if the parking of vehicles on the grass, a storage of vehicles in public view, including the driveway, grass, or a street, display and usage of unapproved no trespassing signs, failure to mow, edge, weed, maintain the lawn and areas around the curb, driveways, and fence lines, and unapproved placement of operation of cameras on the mailbox continue. So basically, they're saying, if you keep doing any of these things, we're going to sue you. And all these things are things that impede the operation of the criminal network. This has been documented in the journal, and it's all there why these things matter to them. This is not random. It's not just for harassing me. All these things impede the functioning of their agents. And this is because certain initiatives I've taken, like, for example, the cameras, right? With the cameras, I have a software system I developed. Then when the system sees a car approaching, and they send these cars to basically do radio frequency eavesdropping on my satellite connection and cell phones. So when these cameras see a car approaching at a distance of 350, 400 feet, it blocks the network. Like it turns off all the internet communications, like the Starlink dish and the cell phones, everything. It turns off everything. And so they cannot use, right? So that's why they want to make me remove the cameras. The no trespassing sign is because if they can't come into the front yard, they can't plant the sensors that they need to detect when I turn on the cell phone, right? Things like that. So all these things that matter to them, right? They're not just random items. Like these things are important to them because their surveillance operation is based on things that require these items to be removed. Okay, if these items are there, they basically can't work. Now, but what I want to, more than the presence of the letter of things, there's a couple of things I want to mention. One is the targeted enforcement of the rules. And to show that, I'm going to show this satellite imagery of the community, right? So this is Lake Pointe Estates. It's this rectangle. I don't know if you can see it here, but it's this, I'm moving my mouse showing you. So it's this rectangle over here, okay? And it basically has 4 streets on the perimeter. And my house is somewhere around here. It's on Britton Ridge Drive. And I'm going to show you with more detail where it is exactly. So this is a key street in terms of what you will see in the counterintelligence journal. Okay, Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 74794. The second important street is this one, North Point Place, Katy, Texas, 77494. And the other one is this one, where Phil Denning lives, which is Briar Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas, 774. These other smaller streets are important because they house super important agents, very important people. Like, they're so important that they're not, how do we say that in English? I don't know. They're not sticking their neck out. Like, they don't take too much exposure or risk. That's why you don't see them that often, but they're very important. Okay, so this is the community itself. Now, I'll go back to this. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I'll show you. So this is my house, right? 2302 Britton Ridge Drive, Katy, Texas. So what I wanted to say is that if you, for example, look at the imagery, right, you see how, so this house is very important. This is a gentleman, we're going to talk about him very soon, but he is the president of a company called Ambassador Petroleum Inc. in Houston. Key company in all this. And you see, he has a car parked outside of his house on the street. And this car is there like 24/7 all the time because it's a surveillance vehicle parked Moscow style. There is a description of what I mean by cars parked Moscow style. And there's pictures of the cameras and everything. But the basic idea is that they park these vehicles on the street, as you can see here. Like in this short distance of maybe 200 feet, they have 1, 2, 3, 4 vehicles parked Moscow style. All these vehicles are surveillance vehicles that are doing two things: monitoring the radio frequency spectrum, looking for MAC addresses. So if a car, let's put an example, right? If an FBI agent sees this video and wants to come check this out, when he drives over here, his cell phone has a MAC address, and it will be seen by all these vehicles and reported to the SEBIN, to the FSB, to the Chinese intelligence services. And they'll know that this MAC address that they probably already have tied to an FBI agent was visiting and passed in front of the house of the president of Ambassador Petroleum. So that's basically how it works. So you see the target and enforcement of the rules here. And again, I'm not saying this because of me. Like, I don't want to make this about me, but it's important to show how they discriminate people, right? Like, they discriminate the adversaries. That's what they do with technology, because they control the HOA and they control these law firms. They harass their targets with legal action for things that they do themselves at a much bigger scale, right? If you look at this image, in just this short distance, they have these 4 vehicles. They have 5, 6, 7, 8, right? 8 vehicles just in this quadrant that I'm showing in this image, right? Parked in driveways, in public view, in the streets. And if Reinaldo Aguiar parks one vehicle in his own driveway, he gets sued, right? And fined $500 a day or $350 a day or something like that, which, if you do the math, it's like $70,000 a year. So this is a targeted enforcement of the rules, right? The other way you see that, and this is more concerning, is with law enforcement. And you will see this in the journal entries that I compiled and also in the ones in the journal. So, for example, at some point, my son was taken from my home. He was taken, right? And I called 911 2 times, and a police officer responded in those 2 occasions, 2 different police officers, and both of them refused to file, even to file a missing persons report, refusing to file a complaint for a missing 3-year-old child. I think it's just an abomination. It's really an abomination of the law enforcement and judicial system. But put that in perspective with this other episode, right? In one instance, when I bought the armored vehicle, when I was entering the community, this community, on the gated, on the checkpoint at the entrance, which is over here, this point, 29.7551 minus 95.79981. I turn on the strobe lights, which are white, completely white. And these are civil grade strobe lights. It's legal for civilians to own and operate these lights. So the president of the HOA, of the Homeowners Association, Phil Denning, made a false police report saying that I was impersonating a police officer because I had police lights in my vehicle. And a police officer immediately came to my property, responded to that, and interrogated me and asked me to open the vehicle. Like, he basically almost conducted a search on the vehicle. They didn't conduct a search, but he asked me to open the vehicle, to turn on the lights and show him all these things, right? Because Phil Denning just simply verbally, I imagine verbally, said so. But if I say that my child has been taken from my home, 2 different police officers and 2 different 911 calls, And I called to the FBI as well, and nobody responds. And when they do respond, they refuse to file a police report, right? So there you can see how the rules, the enforcement of the rules, and even the law is targeted in this community, right? What's more concerning, as I was saying, is that the law is interpreted in a way that benefits them, but hurts the adversary. Right? That always seems to be the pattern. In the case of this law firm, Roberts, Markel, Weinberg, Butler, Haley, PC, the interesting thing beyond the targeted application of the rules is the timing, right? So if you look at the dates, this was on April 1st, 2025. And my son Marcelo was taken from the home on March 28, 2025. So just 4 days before this, okay? The timing of this is very telling. I can't recall. I had filed a Form 211, that is a whistleblower report with the IRS, with the Internal Revenue Service, naming by name Diosdado, Cabello, and Cartel de los Soles for suspected tax fraud. And I did this not out of a hunch or anything. I did this based on the data that I'm seeing, observing on the geo index of Elon Musk and Travis Kalanick that I captured on September 11, 2024. I applied, and this is documented in the website, and I don't want to make this video longer than it needs to be with that information. It's all in the website. But suffice to say that I made that Form 211 submission based on factual information I'm seeing on a database that was leaked to me. And 2 days after my son is taken, 3 days after my son is taken, I received this legal harassment letter asking me to stop doing things that they do hundreds of times per day in multiple of their houses in this community. So the timing, right, is very telling. And then the other piece of this is this other law firm, right, which is called Adams Law Firm. And the lead attorney on this is somebody called Morgan Hybner, okay? And this is the lawyer that is representing Gloria in the separation proceedings. And here I want to be very careful what I'm going to say. I'm going to say it because it could be important, but by no means I'm implying that Gloria is an agent or that I'm not saying any of that. But I need to make the following observations because they could be probatory, right? So what happened was Gloria took the child on March 28, 2025. And then a few days passed. I asked her if I could see him, and she refused. And at some point, she told me that I will only see him after I get better. And this was over text messages. She refused to tell me where he was staying, what was his address. She took him out of the school, and she called the school and said that he would not be attending for over a month, possibly. Of course, I was very concerned because I didn't even know where he was. And she told me that I will only see him after I get better. I didn't really understand what that meant, but because I wanted to see him, I asked her, right, point blank, what do you mean? What do I need to do to see him? And she said, well, you have to go to a psychiatrist and you need to take medication. Those were the two requirements she put for me to be able to see my son. I think I should be able to manage my own healthcare, and my ability to see my own child should not be conditioned to letting somebody else manage my healthcare. And given all this information that I've uncovered, if I go to a psychiatrist or I start taking medication just to see my son, the only person I see that would benefit is Diosdado Cabello. I don't think anybody else would benefit from that, not even me. Anyhow, so they filed that petition for divorce, they called it. We're not legally married, but they call it petition for divorce. And so that I think they filed that on April 7th, if I'm not mistaken, okay, according to the records. And here's the case number, like it's on the 387th District Court, and the case number is 25 Delta Charlie Victor 328122. What happened was I never got served for that proceeding until April 16. I'm working on this project and covering all these things. Is this link on the bottom that is called bosses. And what this is basically a collection, it's a dashboard that contains the addresses of the people that are the highest up in what I call the criminal organization. And these addresses happen to fall in cities like, and you will see it in the map in a minute, they fall in Caracas, Venezuela, you can see it here, La Habana, Cuba, in Tehran, Iran, in Moscow, and in Beijing, China, okay? Basically, what I was working was to compute the scores for each one of these prominent agents or properties ties to these prominent agents. And it's a total of something like 15,000 properties in these 5 cities. So to do this, my system has to do a series of queries to, and this is a bit technical, but it has to do a series of requests, HTTP requests to the Google Maps reverse geocoding API to be able to transform a prominent geolocation coordinates, latitude and longitude, from the Elon Musk geoindex into an actual address, right? So I can tell, okay, what is in this prominent place, right? And then that's how the addresses are calculated. So when I started doing this, for this set of addresses specifically, it's in Caracas, Havana, Beijing, Tehran, and Moscow, on April 16th in the morning, 20 minutes later, I got served with the papers from this, or the divorce, quote unquote, papers from this lawyer, Morgan Hybner. Okay. Just 20 minutes later, after I started working on that, on the reverse coding of the bosses, of the addresses tied to the bosses of the network, and Caracas, Diosdado, Cabello, right? In just 20 minutes, they sent me with the papers. So what happened was they sent a process server in a car that had no license plates in front or in the back. It had no markings, meaning no brand. Like you saw the car, you couldn't tell if it was a Camry or a Honda Accord. All the markings were removed. No license plate, tinted windows that were pitch black. So it looked like my camera system and my pipeline pick up the vehicle, like all the scores were saturated because the car looks like the textbook car of a spy, basically. The guy comes out of the car and he trespasses the property line, ignoring the no trespassing sign. He comes inside and he tries to pick up a fight with me. And then eventually he left, like after 10 minutes, and then he left, and then he turned around and he parked the car just in front of my house for another 10 minutes, right? And he rolled down the window and started to look like he was provoking me, I think. Like he wanted to create an incident in which I became violent, which I didn't fall for that, of course. But all this happened just 20 minutes after I started using the Google Maps API to do the reverse geocoding for those prominent addresses in Caracas, right? This tells me that there's a possible coordination between that lawyer, between Morgan Hybner, and Diosdado Cabello's organization, right? Because the timing, right? They filed the lawsuit 9 days before, and I only got served specifically, right, after I started working on that. I understand how process servers work. I understand it could take a week. I understand that the sole situation on itself would not be entirely suspicious. But if you add to that the other thing, the fact that I was working on that specific project, which is verifiable, all law enforcement agencies have to do is subpoena Google logs for my request that day to the Google Maps API, and you'll see that I'm telling the truth. And you can correlate that with the photo of the server, which is posted on this page and in spyhole.org, that has the timestamp in which he came to my house to harass me, basically. That tells me that there's possible coordination between Morgan Hybner, Adam's law firm, and Diosdado Cabello. And on top of that, as if it wasn't enough, Morgan Hybner, properties tied to her, are marked in the geoindex of Diosdado Cabello, and the Adams law firm itself is marked. So what you do is that you test properties and you say, if it walks like a dog and it makes sounds like a dog and it looks like a dog, yeah, it's probably a dog, right? I have high confidence here that Morgan Hybner is part of the network. It's another data point, and this is more delicate. And again, I want to make the observation that when I say this, I'm not saying in any way that I believe my former partner is an agent. I'm not making any accusations in that regard. But this I have to say because it could be an operational procedure, okay? And if it is, if this is an operational procedure, I think it shows a level of planning that it's unprecedented. So this is observation. When we started dating and I learned about what happened with her ex-husband, Salvador, who has been flagged, and there was a series of messages recently when a YubiKey was stolen that were clustered with him. And that is documented also in the journal and in the video. But when we started dating, I learned that he had suffered from a mental condition And basically, and I don't want to talk about other people's medical conditions. Now, when Marcela was taken from the home and Gloria retained Morgan Hybner, she told me, she volunteered that the only reason, I didn't ask her this question, but she volunteered the information. She said that the only reason why she hired Morgan Hybner is because she had been the lawyer that represented her on her previous divorce to Salvador Mendez, which is shocking to me, right? Because if, assume for a second that Morgan Hybner, just for the sake of the argument, that the man trespassed, that the man came in a car with no license plates, which is illegal, and that the man being a process server should know that he has no right to go into private property if there's a no trespassing sign, right? He must have received training telling him this, and he ignored all that, right? So assume for a second that all that is like that, and Morgan Hybner is really an agent. So if, and remember, Salvador was flagged by the pipeline, Salvador being the previous husband that Morgan Hybner divorced, right? That supposedly had a mental condition. And Morgan Hybner got a restraining order against Salvador for his mental condition. So assume for a second that they two are agents, Morgan Hybner and Salvador, right? So if they made that divorce just months before my former partner and I started dating, just to insert the possibility of, I guess it would be like to insert like plausible deniability, right? This is something that happened before with another person 10 years ago. It could happen again, right? I guess that's probably the angle, right? And the other interesting thing to me is that during this time, the times that I talked to my former partner about Salvador, she made allegations like Salvador was accusing me of trying to poison him, or things that are strikingly similar to what the Venezuelan army informant told me that it was doing to hurt me. It feels strange, right? It's so much of a coincidence in a way that the previous husband was making supposedly allegations strikingly similar to this, things that were told to me by the informant. I don't know. It feels strange, right? It feels, and remember, Morgan Hybner was supposedly, and I don't know if it's true, I haven't checked, but supposedly she was the lawyer that represented my former partner in her previous marriage, separation, divorce. So it feels like it could have been planned, right, from 10 years ago. And if that's the case, who in the world has the resources and the knowledge and the previous experience, really, to plan something with that much advance, 10 years of advance, knowing exactly what could happen? I think it would have to be state-sponsored. I don't think any company, any commercial company would have the logistic or experience to plan for something like that with that level of time buffer surrounding it in a way. So that's why I'm volunteering this information. And of course, as the same thing as we saw with the Texas Department of Agriculture, one way to see if this is an operational procedure would be to look for divorces, right? In which the person filing for divorce asks for a restraining order and a psychological evaluation of the other person, and had done the same thing in a previous marriage where the other person that was asked to take the psychological evaluation is an agent, meaning is marking the geo index. Right? So if you encounter that setup again, it might mean that it's an operational procedure. It's a way to see the same situation that could happen in the future, in the past, 5 years, 10 years in the past, right? So if it happens again, it wouldn't look suspicious. It looks like just a woman that is attracted to crazy people, right? Like she has bad luck, and every time she gets married, the husband ends up being crazy for one reason or the other. It's an explainable illness, I guess, in a way. But so if that's the case, this means that Morgan Hybner would have been in it since 10 years ago, right? That's why this is important, because it puts a timeline into the planning more than into the events, into the planning of the things. Okay, so next up, we have Ellen Klein. This is a prominent lawyer from New York. And my pipeline flagged him for many things and co-clustered him with Morgan Hybner and with Robert Markel, Wilmer, Butler, Haley, PC, and also importantly with David F. Hine and with Michael. They're all lawyers. And lawyers are an important component of this criminal organization, unfortunately, because they, of course, they weaponize law, as you can see. And to do that, they need lawyers, right? So they need to have an army of them to do these kind of things. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention is that if you look at the timing of this, there's the section about Ellen Klein. I'm not going to go into the details, but it's very well documented why he was clustered and everything. So basically, the pipeline thinks that Ellen Klein and Morgan Hybner and Roberts, Marco, Weinberg, Butler, Haley, PC, and David F. Hine and Michael Hughes, they're all working together from different law firms, right? But they're working together towards the common goal, which is to silence me via legal harassment and the kidnapping of my child. So that's that. The other thing I wanted to mention is that if you look at the timeline of this, that's last week of March, in which I filed the IRS to Form 211 with the IRS, and then Marcelo was taken, and then I was hit in a matter of 7 days with 2 different legal actions, right? For 2 different reasons. So imagine, put yourself in the shoes of a person that faces that, right? Like their son is taken, at the same time they're being legally harassed in 2 fronts for 2 different things by 2 separate group of people. It's a military tactic, right? I'm in my mid-40s, and during all my time in this earth, I have never been sued by anybody. Like, not a single person has ever sued me for anything. And in terms of infractions, I think I may have had in my entire life 2 speeding tickets. I'm a law-abiding citizen, and I play by the rules. But in this particular week, after I made that report naming Diosdado Cabello, then I get hit with 2 no one, but 2 lawsuits. In 40-something years, I've never been sued. And then this week, after I mentioned him, now I'm getting sued 2 times, and my son is taken. So I think that this is it's very telling, right? It's very telling of the way they think, the way they operate, and how they weaponize law. So I'm gonna leave the hyperlocal part of this. This is Alec Lane. That's his picture. The hyperlocal part of this presentation, of this video, on this, and then well, let's expand the circle and let's talk a little bit more about Lake Pointe Estates. The community has 90-something houses. You can see here, right? And in this document that I put together, you will see the list of agents that are marked in the geo index with crypto payments, extracted directly in a deterministic fashion from Elon Musk's geo index. There are no inferences here. And they're ranked from top to bottom by how much crypto payments they've had, like how much money is represented in this geo index as crypto, right? And they're from top to bottom, and you'll see there's 63 of them. So this, of course, LPE, which I have assigned IDs to each one based on their relative position in the list, based on their crypto payments. So this one, LPE1, is the one that is the highest paid agent in the community. And that person was co-clustered by the pipeline with this company, Ambassador Petroleum Inc. Okay? This is an oil company that operates oil leases in Texas and in other places. And the president is Mark Swisher, this person over here. And he's been the president of the company for 30 plus years. There's a lot of data points that I invite law enforcement agencies to read about this. This is a very prominent agent. And I haven't mentioned this before, but the pipeline after he was picked up and this property, there's a lot of signals, confirmatory signals, like the property records were deleted for his house and another house in the same community that is tied to him, according to the pipeline. The records, the tax records are gone if the house is registered to no one, which is very difficult to pull off unless you have people inside of the county clerk or the tax assessor office. And then also his domain name, ambassadorpetroleum.com, was completely erased from the ICANN database. The ICANN is the global organization that manages domain names for the internet. And it's not like the domain was deleted. All the records were expunged, which is not the standard at all. If you create a domain name and you deleted it, ICANN will keep the record that the domain at some point existed, and because this is important information, right, for the functioning of the internet, for many different reasons. But in this case, ambassadorpetroleum.com, the day after I posted about them, the domain name was deleted, and all the history of the domain name was deleted as well. This tells me that this is a very important person because the organization went to the length of exposing what they can do with the ICANN, right, by doing this deception. It's a deception, really, just to protect him, right? Anyhow, the pipeline thinks that ambassador might be a marker of prominence, a name marker of prominence for companies that denotes relationship to people high up in the organization. In other ways, the pipeline thinks that this word ambassador probably represents that this company is a company owned by Diosdado Cabello. And that's why the word ambassador is there, because he's really the president of Venezuela, right? Now, you may think, what would they accomplish with that? That's what the network does. It's a network of influence, right? If somebody from Ambassador Petroleum called the Fort Bend sheriff office and made a complaint, the sheriff will recognize this word, right? Because they've been trained, or maybe the Hell app translates this token, right? And they will recognize that this is Diosdado Cabello's interest, right? And all the doors will open. That's why some of the police reports get filed and some others don't get filed, right? Yes, the other data point that is important to say here is that this person, Mark Swisher, is related to another person named Sarah Swisher, who works in a company called STT International Ltd. That specializes on maritime military equipment and vessels. And the pipeline clustered that entity, STT International Ltd., with Mar Oil, which is a company controlled by Wilmer Ruperti, which is a key player in all this. And I personally named him on the class action lawsuit that I filed with the Southern District Court of Texas. So this might be an important data point, right? Besides that, you see all the other agents, they're all there with names, addresses, and they're sorted by prominence, right? So that's where you can get all the information. I also include in this document what I call a timeline of events and actors, and it's very detailed. And now let's go a little bit to a corner, so to speak, of the subdivision. So these are more observations, not about the agents, but about the subdivision itself. Okay, this is funny. So this image over here is an image it's a photo I took with my drone. In which I rode with a tractor spy, and I put a couple of arrows pointing houses. These two houses next to me are Chinese safe houses, and they have been documented extensively, right? The agents have been photographed, recorded on video. I have an immense amount of material on them, and it's all posted on XisList.org. So the reason I'm highlighting this photo is because Morgan Hybner, the lawyer that is asking for a restraining order and a psychological evaluation of me, she took this picture, she printed this picture, and she attached it into the exhibits that she submitted to the court. I kind of implying that I'm crazy. But I find that funny because she attached only that picture, but she didn't attach this other picture, which is right below, right? And this is the picture that talks about a series of things that I'm going to describe because they're important. But she didn't take this picture. She only took this picture. I think that kind of shows that what are the things that hurt them, right? So let's talk about this picture, which she didn't select. At least I didn't say it. Maybe she did, but I didn't say it. But I think she didn't. So this photo is an aerial photo that I took with my drone of this corner over here of the subdivision. Let me show you here. This corner over here, okay? These houses. And in the image, you will see, let me show you. Okay. In the image, you will see the houses are labeled. So this house here on the left is Damon Sachs' house. Damon Sachs is the son of the home builder that built this community, this gated community, maybe 20 years ago. And the company is called Liberty Homes Builders. This other property in the middle belongs to somebody called Kevin Eckhart. And the pipeline thinks that these two properties together are really a single property. These names are the names that the company, the properties are registered to, but the pipeline believes that these two properties really function as a single property. And in fact, you can see here, right? Like you can see here, you see the tree that is between 24,930 and 24,934. You can see there seems to be a gate in between the two properties here. See? So there is a way to pass from Kevin Eckhart's backyard to Damon Sachs' backyard, right? The gate is there. And the other gate is not visible, but there's also another gate that goes between Kevin Eckhart and Robert Mueller's house, which is 24926 North Point Place. And I know that because I recorded with the Call Mobile the day they were installing that gate. I have a recording of that. So I know there is a gate in there, although it's not visible in this image. Now, this photo is very important because you see this Mueller Robert over here, the pipeline believes, although the middle name initial doesn't match, but the pipeline believes that this person that owns this house is the same Robert Mueller that was a director of the CIA and the FBI at some point. To give an idea of if that's something that probably should be verified by a law enforcement agency, right? They don't have the access or the resources to really go do forensic level verification on the ID. But the pipeline thinks it's the same person. I'm just offering that as an information, right? The pipeline could be wrong, but if it's not wrong, it could be a very important observation. Because that person, right, was the director of the CIA at some point, and I believe he was also in charge of an inquiry investigating foreign influence suspected that was acted by Russian entities at some point in 2018 or 2019, I can't recall. If it's the same person, right? And that person was investigating Russian interferences in the political areas or the political machinery of the country. And now, this person is living in this community that is heavily controlled by these foreign entities. And this house is marked in Elon Musk's Geo Index, right, with crypto payments, paramilitary scores. And it's just feet away from another player, which is tied to Liana Technologies, which I think is the last name. It's just 200 feet away from this house. I think it could raise eyebrows, and it could mean that maybe somebody should investigate these things. Now, there's all these things in this photo that are important to see that are, once you see them, you say, I can't believe this. So, for example, right, in this property of Kevin Eckhart, besides having that gate that goes to the Sachs house or backyard, he also has this other gate, which I call the secret gate. It's here on the north part of the backyard that basically gives unchecked access to the gated community, right? So that's how they were bringing in the cars to do surveillance inside of the community and to intercept the network traffic and all that without checking in the cars in the entrance, right? Because the entrance has cameras and could be subpoenaed. And this is also another example of the targeted application of the rules. So the HOA, they said that they were going to replace the fence and that they basically issued a special assessment of something like $18,000 for the replacement of the fence and all that. And like these people have secret gates and special accommodations on their fence and things like that. And are they paying more? Is it an equal split are they going to remove that gate? Or can I have my own secret gate? All these things, questions that come to mind. But anyhow, he has his own secret gate that goes to the outside. And more interestingly, I don't know if you can see this, but there's this series of power lines, high voltage power lines that come from outside the subdivision, go into Kevin's Eckhart backyard, and then proceeds to go to Robert Mueller's backyard and just terminates there. Like after that last pole, there's no more poles anywhere. So why would a high voltage service line come directly to a person's backyard and not go anywhere else? What is in that backyard or in that house that needs that much power? That's the question. And remember, if this person is really the ex-CIA director, having so much power dedicated to his house, it just raises more questions, right? And as if it wasn't enough, in the same backyard, you can see that concrete structure, right? That takes more or less, I don't know, maybe 20% of the backyard area, like this thing over here. That it's not clear really what it is. If you have a backyard with a structure that is made of concrete that doesn't seem to have a clear purpose, at least not obvious, right? And then a high voltage power line coming next to it on a house that has the same name of somebody that was a CIA director and the head of an inquiry on foreign interference. I don't know. I don't know what else would it be needed to ask for an investigation from the FBI or the NSA. The only thing that could top this is a sign that says, I'm working for the other team. Anyhow, the other interesting thing, and I think this is very telling as well, is that if you look in Google Maps, the satellite imagery of this area, you cannot see the posts. The posts were deleted, like they're not in the image, but the shadows of the posts remain. And I mark the shadows with this arrow. So what this tells me is that somebody at the company that this image, which happens to be Airbus or at Google, could be as well, right? Either in one of those two places. Somebody edited the image to doctor out the posts and the electricity lines. But of course, they didn't. This is super interesting, right? You see, in this image, the gate in between Eckhart and Sachs, the lateral gate, doesn't seem to be there. That's an interesting point. I'll look it up just to give you an idea, right? And I think if you take these few observations, the Eckhart house, the Mueller house, the Ambassador Petroleum houses, the connections that these entities have to international entities, geopolitical entities, it shows you, right? That's what I meant at the beginning, that this community is probably connectable to geopolitical or international entities. It could be a key piece on fighting back on this. And there are other important observations here, more things about legal harassment and times they tried to harm me in different ways. And this man that is here, he seems to be a constant actor. And in this photo, he's shown trespassing, delivering this letter, which is a letter that came from the attorneys I described before, the Roberts, what's the name? Roberts, Markel, Wimberg, Butler, Haley, PC. So those initials RMWBH are the initials that you can see there in the envelope. So that's the letter that and you can see the date, right? 4/1/2025. That's the harassment letter that I showed you before. But this man, I should say, he was co-clustered by my facial recognition system with a man that I believe gave the order to switch my medication at Kroger Pharmacy. And he was also tagged with the CIA tag, meaning the pipeline believes that this could have been an ex-employee of the CIA or maybe even an active employee of the CIA, an active operative of the CIA. And remember, if you look at the distance, right, this happened. So when the place where that man is standing is exactly here, 29.75782 minus 95.80561. And Robert Mueller's house is here, 29.75907, more or less over here, right? 29.75900 and minus 95.80673. So it's a distance of maybe 200 feet from somebody tagged as a possible CIA operative and the house of somebody who was the director of the CIA at some point. So this is very concerning, right? That's why I felt that it was a dangerous situation. And when Marcelo was taken, I have to be honest, I was relieved because if I see danger for myself in that house, right? Knowing that the ex-CIA director is 200 feet away or at least properly controlled by him, and that they're sending this possible CIA agent to harass me at my home, having my son there didn't sound like a good idea. And there was another incident recently in which another man, could be the same man, but in another instance, the man was clustered also with this man and with the Kroger Pharmacy man by the facial recognition system. And he was also harassing me at this instance here. He was following me to a Kroger store and the vehicle was flagged and there's a lot of data points to that. I really invite law enforcement agencies to check out this if it's possible. And if this is wrong, I implore you, please tell me, right? You're wrong. There's nothing to say here. But at least check it out. Yeah, more. So this trespassing incident here of April 16, this is the guy that Morgan Hybner sent to my house to harass me 20 minutes after I started using the Google Maps API to look up addresses in Caracas, right? This is the guy. And you can see that he's clearly trespassing the line. And there is a not trespassing sign, which they have sent me letters asking me to take it down, right? So it's clearly visible. And I have photos of him looking at the sign. But he didn't care, right? He trespassed because it was a harassing technique. Yes. So there's a lot of, yeah, this is another important point. So in this list of entries, you will see a lot of faces and you will see a lot of vehicles that are important. Like, for example, the Britos one vehicle. This is a notable. So there's a set of vehicles that are notable that the pipeline things are directly tied to Diosdado Cabello. One of them is this one, Texas Britos. Another one is Texas Weekend Surf. Another one is Texas 5. Another one is Texas Marutee. And there's pictures of these vehicles following me, both outside of the community and inside of the community, passing in front of my house. Yeah, for example, the Britos one, right? You can see him. So here he's passing right in front of my house. And 9 months before, he was following me far away from my house. And I have the spectrometer readings and everything, and the GPS locations and everything. So there's a lot. Yeah, so this is Phil Denning. He's an important character. He is the president of the Homeowners Association. He's been a main actor in the harassment campaign, and it's been documented extensively in multiple. This is interesting. It looks like one video was removed. Yes, I'll look into that. This video over here is an incident in which this woman trespassed the property lines, and she came armed with 2 walking sticks, and she basically attacked the door of my house. Like, she beat it, and then there's a recording of all the things that she screamed. Like, it was harassment, pure harassment. Yeah, I'll look into that. It seems like they're removing the videos that are compromising to them, right, from YouTube. So let's do something. Let's stop this presentation at this point. I'm going to debug that for a bit to see what they did remove and if I even get notified, because if I didn't, then it means that there's internal collaboration on the removal. And then I will make a part 2 of this video to continue. Thank you so much and have a great day.